Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a registered therapist, author, and mental health advocate. With me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maylard. How you doing, Duck?
I'm good. I'm recovering. For those of you who have been following along with the saga of my health, it seems to be a longer recovery than I thought I would with my surgery and my COVID. But I'm okay now.
I'm impressed that you're up and. I mean, it hasn't been that long since you had surgery.
It's like a week. Well, the surgery is 2 weeks. Just had my first checkup. I'm all good, healing up well. So I can show you all my scars. It's really exciting.
So for this episode, this a little bit different than what we've done before because we're shooting this before the interview because you're not going to be. You actually have an acting gig.
This is my first. I had to miss a podcast record for an actual paying gig. But this is the musical that I've told you all about that I'm doing. I'll be in full rehearsals at that point. So hopefully by the time this comes out, I'm already overcome all my anxiety and my fear, and I'm just well into the run of things. But yeah, I'm gonna miss this interview today, unfortunately.
So a good reason to miss an interview is to have a good opportunity. But how does it make you feel to know that I'm going to be in this room next week?
No one's going to be sitting in my spot. That's what's okay. You know what? It's I like it because I think as for listeners, sometimes it's interesting to hear a different style of interview without me interrupting over here and making jokes or something. You know what I mean? I think it's some of my favorite podcasts that are duos are some of the most interesting episodes are the ones where one of the duo can't make it. And you get to hear maybe a different, interview style from you or something like that. So
yeah, and life happens and you got to roll with the punches sometimes. It's only a matter of time before something like that.
It's probably a pretty impressive feat that we've done as many as we have already without having to go down to one interview or, here or there.
Well, I did do actually a couple interviews before you were on board, and we ended up not putting them out because they just, I think they were good opportunities.
That je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, I mean, how could they be as good as they could be without Duck a la Maylard.
A la mode.
No, but I think that when you came on board was when I started to find my tone and pace as a host. And so now, if I were to do those interviews again, I would have a totally different approach than I did then. And that's part of the reason why we didn't put those out. But now I feel a little bit more confident that without you here, hopefully I could establish some of the same sort of feeling of the way that the rapport we have.
Right. But I love this. As a viewer of a TV show or a listener, when you go back and you watch a beloved show in the first season and you see that maybe they hadn't found the character's voice yet, or the shooting style was different, or the wardrobe was different. I love that stuff. I love an organic growth of a story, of a project. And so you go back and you listen to You're in My First Interview, or the first interview that we conducted with somebody else. It's different than what it has become now, and I love that. I know a lot of people want to come into especially a podcast where you kind of have one chance to grab a listener, so you want to have it as polished, and you're super focused on getting that audio up and running. And I was always like, it's fine, we can record on a phone, it's fine, But for me, it's exciting to kind of see it evolve and see it come into its own and become whatever it's eventually going to be. If we do 500, 1,000 episodes of this podcast, which I hope we do, I can't wait to see how it evolves over time. Will we be in a different space? Will we shoot on different gear? Will we have different styles? I think it's great. It's exciting. So hopefully our listeners and our viewers feel the same way, and they're not just like, I hope these guys figure it out soon, because it's like whiplash trying to figure out the style or whatever.
Well, it was interesting for me because the first thing that I did obviously was the intro episode, which was just me at my desk, just talking to camera. I mean, I made an outline, I think, the night before, and I went over it a couple times beforehand, and then I didn't even really look at it. I just remembered what I wanted to talk about, but it wasn't scripted. And my feeling right afterwards was like, that was a good first try, but I'm going to have to do that again. And then the response I got was like, that was great. That's a great. And like, by the time it came out, when I watched it, I was like, oh man, like it's already evolved so much since then. Like there's a different tone to it, like the way that we talk with each other. And so even by a month later, it had already gone through that for me, where I was like, oh, you can see the kernel of where it started.
Right.
And so now I'm kind of like, well, I wish that was more like the ones now.
Right.
But at the same time, it has, I guess, that feeling that you're describing.
And if nothing else, you can kind of plot the passage of time by my facial hair. You know, we started out, I think I had the full mustache and nothing. Then I grew the beard, then back to the mustache. Now back to the beard. Who knows
Except that I, being as OCD as I am, start rearranging the order of the release.
Based on my facial hair?
No, I'm just saying we've released a couple where it's like, oh, he has a beard, and then he has a mustache, and then he has a beard again. What happened?
Well, look, I'm a chameleon. As an actor, I like to not look the same, so I don't have a problem with it. Hopefully you don't either.
All right, so on today's episode, we have an old friend of mine, acquaintance friend. I mean, I knew him basically on one or two tours. Darrin Pfeiffer, he was the drummer of the band Goldfinger, and that was one of the...
I love Goldfinger, sorry.
If you're a 90s kid and you love punk...
Or if you had Tony Hawk Pro Skater, because Goldfinger was prominently featured on the soundtrack of those games, and like me, that you played them nonstop, and that those songs were on a loop in your head, so that's where I know him from.
Try touring with that band for however many months we did. And try getting those songs out of your head then.
They're catchy.
They're
Pop
very
punk is catchy, man.
That was, I mean, formative years. I was 19 years old when I went on the road for the first time.
Wow.
And it was Goldfinger. I think the very first tour we did was opening for Real Big Fish.
Is this Kara's Flowers?
As Kara's Flowers,
oh, okay.
Yeah, so 97, our first album, the Fourth World. We opened for Real Big Fish at one point, and the Aquabats. Do you remember the Aquabats?
I don't.
That was the band that Travis Barker of Blink-182 was in before he was in Blink-182. And then we did a tour with Goldfinger and Safe Ferris. Remember Safe Ferris?
Come On Eileen cover.
Yeah.
Shout out to my buddy Kevin, who just loves Safe Ferris and all the pop punk ska of that day.
So Darrin was like the total goofball of the band. He was the sort of Ringo or the Keith Moon, like the total wild child. Like there was, on any given night, he might barge into your dressing room like totally naked and just like jump on you.
Sounds like my kind of guy in the 90s.
I don't even, in my memory, I'm like, he was probably a wild, raging alcoholic, but now that I'm thinking about it, I don't remember alcohol being involved. Yeah. I think he was just nuts.
Sometimes there are guys like us, sometimes we just take our clothes off. It happens.
But he was always fun. He was always had a smile on his face. And they were a lot older than us, the Goldfinger. I mean, they were like 30.
Probably, I was going to say, a lot older.
So Darrin would dress up also a lot. He would like put on women's clothing. He would, just anything to get attention and get a laugh. But we were touring with Safe Ferris, and it was Halloween. So he decided that for the first couple songs of their set, he was going to be Monique of Safe Ferris. And so he came out, and I think their singer, John, played the drums. And they played Come On Eileen, and he dressed up like Monique. I can't tell the rest of the story. I'm just realizing. Because he changed the lyrics to Come On Eileen.
I think
you can figure out.
I think we can figure out where this is headed. He probably did the same thing that we all did with Dexy's Midnight Runners version, which is change it the same way.
So I'm not going to tell you what the punchline is, but you could probably imagine. But that's just,
it was the 90s. It was a different time.
But it was in good fun, and it was funny at the time. Monique was there. It's not like,
Right.
She was, I don't know, maybe she was pissed. She probably was, actually, now that I think about it.
Well, you did the same, though. You'd come up every now and then and sing some AC/DC, and Adam would go back on the drums and stuff, right?
Yeah. That became, at first, I would sing it from behind the drums.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Actually, the first time we did that was probably around 98, but before we were Maroon 5 and before it was AC/DC, it was The Who, Bob O'Reilly.
Oh, wow.
That was the first song that I sang lead on, and it was, I think the first time was at the Whiskey, and we would play, the whole thing, not the whole outro, but some of it. But I would sing a little bit. Yeah. We started doing Highway to Hell.
Right.
And I would sing like this with the mic, but I realized it was kind of hard to really rock out and sing like that. So then drummers all want to be frontmen. Sure. Secretly, they want to be singers, and singers all want to be drummers. Adam in particular. Any moment that I stood up for my drum set, he would jump back there immediately. I'd be like, oh. But so it was good for both of us. I got to be out front.
Well, now not to turn our silly conversation about people running into dressing rooms naked serious, but at what point, or maybe right at the beginning, when did that start becoming difficult for you, knowing what you were going through anxiety-wise, like coming out from behind the drum kit and getting up in front and being the front man for a song? Was that increasingly difficult, or was it a moment where you could just let go? And
the latter. Yeah? It's actually kind of weird. We started doing that kind of stuff early on, when we were just like a garage band playing around town, we would play people's, 16th birthday party and stuff like that. And I always wanted to get up on the mic, and we would even just improvise, and I would like freestyle rap and stuff like that. And I remember us playing covers of like White Zombie and just like, I remember doing Suck My Kiss, like the Chili Pepper song. And I was never scared of doing that, even though I wasn't a singer. I don't know. It's weird. I'm not somebody who like always needs a lot of attention, but for some reason, if there's an open microphone, I just wanted to be up there and rocking out. We would do
guilty as charged as well.
Yeah. So I think that by the time we got to that level though, and I was having my problems with the drums, by the time we got to that point of the night, because it was always the closer.
Okay.
It was like I had gotten through it. My job was done.
Yeah.
Because I was always worried about, am I going to be able to, represent myself and the band well and get through all of these songs in a way that sounds like the record and that is going to continue to build this fan base that we were building. So by the time we were done with that, we were doing a cover song and I'm singing and playing guitar, which is not even my job.
Yeah.
It was just a party at that point. It was just like, oh, okay, now we can just have some fun. And so at that point, it was like all of the stress and everything kind of went out the window, and I just stepped into this sort of character. Maybe now that I'm thinking about it, thank you for asking that question. That was the beginnings of the sort of alter ego that I've described that came out in my heavy
the lead
drinking.
singer energy.
Yeah. Just kind of like, okay, well, life of the party, all eyes on me. Like there's nothing bad going on behind the scenes. It's all just fun
on
and
a highway to hell.
Look at me.
Now metaphorically, that's probably there you go.
That's the irony. And I think I did actually write that in the book. It was like, ironically, I was up there having fun, screaming at the top of my lungs, I'm on a highway to hell.
Yeah.
And so that's what was really going on. And at the time, the irony didn't hit me. It took me a decade of,
we don't
reflection.
Always know what we're doing until we have the benefit of hindsight, right?
Yeah. But God, what a weird journey.
I remember, to tie it back to me, as I always like to do, I remember the same exact feeling. I talked about the off-Broadway show that I was doing when I started dealing with my anxiety, and it was the worst feeling in the world. But we would do, for the curtain call, we do Dance to the Music by, is it Sly and the Family Stone, And we'd all just be dancing around and doing stupid shit. And I felt great during that number because I didn't have to be in character. I didn't have to sing, really. I just been I play the guitar. Exactly. I was adding the bottom. And so like, I remember that being the release of like, I can let it all go. I can actually, this must be like what everyone else feels like for the rest of the show. They're just having fun. But yeah, there is that moment of like, my job is done. Like my watch has ended and I can now just be silly for 10 minutes or something.
I remember finding that weird because I always looked forward to the after party.
Yeah.
Not before the Maroon 5 days. Like for the longest time when we were a local band, I was always looking forward to the show. But when we had an album out that was in the charts, and like I said, I was mostly concerned with, will I be able to represent myself in the band well? The show itself was work. It was like, I need to get through this to the best of my ability, and then I can relax and celebrate. And so I was always looking forward to how much fun we're going to have after the show. And I wasn't really focused on having fun during the show, which is unfortunate. And I think that it was interesting to me, like in sobriety, going to a Maroon 5 show and coming backstage afterwards. And I think I was like all geared up to like, oh, there's going to be an after party. It's going to be like the old days. Everyone's going to be drinking. And there was no after party because it's like, these guys are all older now.
Right, with
kids, there's nannies. They want to go home and rest. Like the show is the party. Yeah. Why do you have to have a party after the party? You just partied on stage.
Because you're 25. That's why.
Yeah. But I think for me also is because I think that the impulse had to do with the amount of stress that I was putting on myself and needing to blow off that steam afterwards. But if you find that center, that mindful place, that what you're doing is not a place of stress. Performance doesn't have to be stress if you're in a mindful state when you're doing it. Then you're present and you're enjoying it and you're not putting all that pressure on yourself. Then why would you need to go then blow off steam afterwards?
That's a good point.
I don't know. That just.
I wonder if our guest today has a similar take on.
Nice segue.
Thank you.
So Darrin Pfeiffer has gone through a similar transition as me in that he had to leave the band that he'd been in for a long time. I think around 2016, so later than me. But he made a nice segue into being a radio host, DJ. He's got a podcast himself. So his personality, he's putting to good use. It's good to see that he's doing well.
Yeah.
We just kind of like ran into each other on Instagram after a long time.
Slid into the DMs.
And it was like, well, you know what? This could be a fun conversation. Because I'm guessing he's, I'm 46 now, so he's probably in his 50s at this point. He's probably not getting naked and running into people's dressing rooms anymore.
Although, check out the YouTube portion of this, because you never know. Maybe he'll just, maybe I should not sit in this seat once he's done.
So we'll see if he's mellowed out in middle age. But it'll be nice to catch up with him and see what's going on. Anything else you want to add before we jump into the conversation?
I'm not going to even plug the Harder to Breathe podcast at gmail.com or leaving us a comment on Instagram, because you guys all know that already. But please feel free, because we really want to interact with you guys, answer some questions, anything you want to know about the show.
All right. Now, without any further ado, my conversation,
not mine,
with Darrin Pfeiffer here on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Darrin Pfeiffer, welcome to the Harder to Breathe podcast.
Thank you for having me, my friend. It's been a long time. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you too, man. I was doing the math, and I think the last time we were in a room together was in 1997, which would make it 27 years.
Wow.
Is that right? Am I doing the math right?
I'm getting hard to breathe in here. That's a long time. Now I'm old. It's old finger now. But yeah, it's been a couple minutes since we were together.
I want to take you back because I was 19 years old.
Wow.
We were on tour with you guys, Goldfinger. It was our first, maybe not our first tour, but our first like few months of touring. Opening for you guys. We were just out of high school. You guys were like, you had already had a hit. You already had a hit record, a song on the radio. I think you were on your second record at that point. The impression that I got of you guys was that you were a little bit older than us. You had a couple guys that were already like sober and like,
correct.
Seemed like adult men to us in some ways, much further into life. And then in other ways, like completely like immature, like rambunctious.
That would be me. Yeah.
What was your world like at that point in your life? I mean, I have my sort of perspective coming into your world at that point, but what was your world like for you?
Well, I would say it would be similar in some ways to what you went through with Maroon 5. Like it was whirlwind.
Uh-huh.
My head was spinning. Yes, we were a little bit older than you. I think we were in our mid-20s around that time, 24, 25, somewhere in there. And we were on our second record, and it was just happening so quickly. We didn't have a chance to stop and breathe. It was just one tour after another, one video, one recording session, and then boom, you guys have a day off. We have a day off tomorrow, right? No, you're flying to Japan. It's like, really? They're like, yeah. And then after that, you fly to Australia, and then when you land, you play. Like we're one of those bands that landed in Japan and didn't have a time to acclimate. We went right to the venue,
right?
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
The same thing with like flying to Europe. Like there was just no time, so our heads were just spinning, and I was like an animal let out of his cage.
Okay.
So I mean, similar to a lot of drummers, Trey Cool's like this. So there's a lot of drummers that are just bombastic and wild. So that was like a free reign for me to just be completely as crazy and wild as I possibly could.
Was that the way that you were sort of coping with the craziness of your life, was to just kind of let yourself be a wild man? Was that?
I think that might have been a subconscious way to deal with all the stress of travel and all the stress of the record label and the management company and the demands that were put on us at that time. Looking back now, were ridiculous, but we were in our 20s, so like we can handle it, no problem. But no sleep, okay, or little sleep, or whatever. Let's just roll on. And there was never drugs. Like two of the guys were sober.
Mm-hmm.
I drank, and I never did any drugs, but. So there wasn't any kind of substance abuse or anything like that some bands fall into. But going back to you guys, Cars, Flowers, we were in love with you. We thought you guys were great. And it's not very often that we see a band open for us and we're all collectively, the four of us, who couldn't agree on anything.
Right.
That we all collectively were like, this band is got something real special. Like their songs are so good. I mean, not one, all of them were just so good. We got to get that band out again. And then we called our management, find Cars Flowers, get them on again. And we just couldn't wait to, when you guys were on the bill, we couldn't wait to see you guys. Like we would go sit side stage and watch you guys play. Like, wow, listen to that melody, listen to that hook. And all you guys could play. You were all good players. So it was just a joy to watch you guys like perform.
I remember that. I mean, I remember looking over at the side of the stage and seeing you guys like sitting there watching our set every night. And I think for us, it was almost hard to even sort of integrate that with our self-perception because we were so young and so inexperienced. And for a band that was already out there with a hit record, it seemed almost like they must be just like humoring us, you know, they must be like pretending like they like us a lot because it didn't seem like that was possible yet to be at that level where we were being admired by people we admired, you know? So it's kind of weird to look back now. I think we were very precocious in some ways, way ahead of our years. In particular, you mentioned the melodies, you know, Adam just had that natural knack for melody. And then Jesse being the sort of co-writer with him, they just had this chemistry in terms of how they came up with harmonies, and there was the you know 2 guitar harmony solos and all this stuff that was way beyond our years because we weren't really like trained musicians or anything like that. But I think we got away with that in that world of the punk ska thing with you guys. But we were also self-conscious because we were not a punk ska band. We were influenced by some of the same bands, but we were much more into like the 60s British pop kind of thing, the Beatles and the Who, and we were doing more of that as much as we were doing Weezer and Green Day. We definitely were not doing ska. And we used to get feedback from your fans a lot, like, you guys would be better if you had a horn section or like if you played the guitar on the upstroke. So I don't know how exactly.
And you're like, okay, so ska band, right? You want us to be a ska band.
Right.
Got it. I think in time, our fans, because we played a fair amount of shows together. I think in time, our fans saw those British bands, the Beatles, the Who, influences in our music.
Oh, yeah.
And John talked, especially Feldman, talked about it at length about how he worshipped the Beatles, and why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And we that's something we all agreed on. Like, yeah, we all agreed that the Beatles are awesome. Like, how can you not? So I think our fans started to hear Beatleisms in John's writing and John's melodic structures,
sure.
and yeah, there was a lot of punk, and there was a fair. I don't think we weren't a ska band. Like, we had some ska songs, and when people caught a ska band, even to this day, I'm like, time out. Do you think Rancid's a ska band?
Right.
They play ska. They're not a ska band. Do you think NoFX? They have some ska songs. They're not a ska band. Real Big Fish are a ska band. The Mighty Mighty Bosstones are a ska band. The Interrupters are a ska band. We dabbled. I mean, we played punk. We played ska. We played a fair amount of reggae. We played straight up like poppy punk. Like, John would refer it. He loved the Replacements,
right?
So that sound came through. But there was the Beatles and Who-isms and we even covered the Who, and we covered the Beatles, and like we loved that. So I think our fans heard that in your music,
right?
Because we talked about it all the time. You got to see this band, Cars Flowers. They're so good, and they sound like the Beatles, and they're just the melodies. Oh my god! Like, so I think eventually our fans were like, okay, we want to dance around with ska, or we want to do a mosh pit for the punk stuff, but at the end of the day, it really does come down to songwriting.
Yeah.
And I think our fans got that about you guys.
Yeah. Your explanation of what your life looked like at that point, I can really relate to, right? Of course, because at that point it was a whirlwind, but it became a much bigger whirlwind once the band as Maroon 5 blew up, and it became already an intense lifestyle. And now you have a lot more eyes on you and a lot more responsibility. And it's like one tour ends and you're into the next one on a different continent. So what did that lifestyle do to you? I mean, at a certain point, was there a breaking point? I mean, did you start having symptoms of how this was like stressful for you, or did you manage it pretty well?
I think the latter. We managed it pretty well because we were still in our 20s. No one had any problems with drugs or alcohol. I mean, like I said, me and the bass player drank, but it wasn't a problem. We were able to, get some sleep and get on the plane or get on the bus and function and do press and videos and all the things that were required of us. But we at one point, we broke a world record we played 387 shows in one calendar year.
What?
And Guinness
Really?
reported about it, and like I guess it was a world record at that time.
How do you? There was more than one.
There was 3 show days. We would do a morning show at the radio station.
Right.
We'd play 5 or 6 songs. We considered that a show.
Okay, yeah.
And then we did a matinee in the city for the people that could, the all ages matinees for kids that were under 21. And then we did a 21 and over.
Okay.
We did that, and then, or we would do matinee and 21 and over. So we did a lot of 2 show days.
Wow.
And a lot of our days off, or were supposed to be days off, were fly days.
Right.
So we didn't really have a day. Our day off was in the air.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'd land in Tokyo and go right to the venue. Most bands land in Tokyo and have a day off, or at least a night off.
Yeah.
We landed and went right to the venue.
Were you one of those people who could just get on a plane and conk out, so you were able to
Yeah.
Okay.
I've always been the guy that's on the plane. This is exciting. But, and the band, I think the first time we went to Japan, the band was so pissed at me because I got in the plane, had a meal, and fell asleep. And I was out cold. And I woke up, and I remember looking at John Feldman and Charlie Paulson, and they were behind me. And I was like rubbing my eyes. I'm like, where are we? And they're like, you're an asshole. And I'm like, what did I do? And they're like, you slept the whole flight. I go, well, when are we landing? They're like, 40 minutes. And I'm like, well, what about you? And they're like, look at me. Like their eyes were red,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
like, and I go, you didn't sleep at all? They're like, not a wink. I'm like, I feel great.
That explains why you always had so much energy.
Yeah.
Well, that was like me and Adam, because Adam was that way. He just somehow, he always had lots of energy, but he could just turn it off and rest when he needed to. And I was that way, where I'd get on a plane and I'd be wired. I'd be excited, and then I was like, oh no, I need to get some sleep. But then I'd be like looking at the clock, and it's like, well, if I can get some sleep now, I can get another hour or two. And then I got
a TV in front of me. I could watch a movie.
Yeah,
I got my headphones on. I can listen to some music.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but then you're a drummer though. And so that kind of performance, playing sometimes 3 times a day, would take a toll on you physically as much or more than anyone. You must have really good mechanics. You must have been trained in terms of stick technique and stuff, which I wasn't. That was a problem for me. How did you get through all those shows playing that much and not get carpal tunnel syndrome or something like that?
It wasn't the 3 show days, 2 show days wasn't the norm.
Okay.
It was the exception. Most of it was like just every day. And I just always had this energy, this boundless energy. Today, I can play 3 sets.
Wow.
I've been filling in for a couple different bands around town, and sometimes there's 3 sets, and I gotta learn a ton of material and play. And as I've gotten older, I really started to focus on my stick technique, my stamina.
Yeah.
And I talked to drummers like Bill Stevenson from Descendants, and I've watched him over the years go from bashing away and being this incredibly gifted punk drummer to barely touching the skins.
Right.
And I said to him one time, I'm like, you play very light. And he's like, well, number 1, I'm old. Number 2, let the microphones do the work.
Sure.
Back in the day when I was in my 20s, I was a full basher. I just bashed away. I didn't care. I just had, and if it was 2 show days or 3 show days, I had the energy of a wild animal.
Yeah.
I didn't care.
That's crazy, because we're not talking about like smooth jazz. We're talking about hard punk rock and, driving stuff. And it's kind of cool that even in that style, if you know what you're doing, you don't have to exert yourself to the point where you're doing damage.
Plus, I never did the Dave Grohl bashing, and what I mean by that, I never had long hair that I would swing around, and I'm not an arm drummer.
Okay,
we see those guys around.
That was my mistake.
That flail their limbs or their arms, or oh, look at me, and their cymbals are way over there. My cymbals were pretty close to the drums, and because I wanted to keep the hit close. Yeah, I didn't want to reach for the cymbal. Sure, and that's why I had cymbals all over the place. There's always somewhere, no matter where I'm on the kit, there's a crash cymbal. Right. There's one there. There's one over there. And the band gave me a lot of grief for that too. They're like, how come you have so many cymbals? I'm like, why do you have so many pedals? Yeah. Can't you play guitar with 5 strings? That's
a good comeback, because there is that. I remember that coming up, how there was 2 camps. There was the punk rockers and the people who were minimalists. And then there was the Rush guys, the Neil Peart. And you would never see the punk rockers usually have the big drum set with 18 cymbals and 14.
I got there though. I did. At one point I had 3 racks and 2 floors. double pedal, 5 crashes, 2 chinas, 2 splashes.
In a punk rock band.
Yeah. Well, we weren't really a punk rock band.
Okay.
We were just a band that had a lot of punk songs. But like I said, there was some replacement songs. And there was also some reggae down stuff.
Sure.
There was some ska, which is just backbeat, 4 on the floor kind of stuff. And then the band, that's when they really gave me grief. They're like, do you really need 2 china cymbals?
Right.
I'm like, no.
But I like it.
And your point, like, I like it. And I say, when we're rocking out and we're on stage and we're giving it and we're going, and I'm like hitting da 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 da, you're like, yeah. And then after the show, you're like, do you really need 2 china cymbals? Like a principal, like you should have got an A there, Darrin. You got a B.
Right.
So it's just funny, that dichotomy between equipment. But as far as the energy question, yeah, I'm always like, let's go. And when the set ended, I'm like, I wanted to do something crazy. Like I'd run into the opening band's room naked, or I'd throw firework crackers and throw them in there, shut the door. Like I just had ADD, so I had to just keep moving. Even now, I'm like, and only had 1 cup of coffee this morning.
So you mentioned ADD. Was that a diagnosis that you received at some point? Or?
Yeah, when I was a child, I was on Ritalin. And I think it carried over into my adult life, but I'm able to I'm not on like Adderall or anything like that, but I'm able to handle it. I'm able to focus, but it's still in me, I think. I think it's part of my life. And the fact that I became a drummer just makes all the sense in the world.
Sure. How did that affect you as a kid? Did you have issues in school focusing and stuff like that? Or
I did, yeah. I went from school to school, behavioral problems. My dad passed when I was 10, and that really kicked it into gear. I already had it at that point, but then when my dad passed, I just became hard to control. So one school to the next, and I graduated and went to college, but it was difficult. It wasn't until I got in my later high school years, junior, senior, when I started to calm down and go, okay, I like to have fun, I like to be wild, I like to be the clown, but I got to graduate.
Yeah.
I got to get my degree or my diploma so I can go on with my life. But that's when I started to that's when focusing got easier.
Okay. So how do you relate to that side of you then? Was it kind of like a coping mechanism, a way to sort of escape by looking for more stimulation and looking outward rather than sitting with I presume, pain of the loss?
Yeah. And music played a big part of that. Drums, obviously, but then I learned how to play bass, and I took an interest in the guitar. It's so funny. I grew up a Van Halen fan. I loved Van Halen. I loved Van Halen, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, obviously the Beatles and the Who, classical music. My mom liked classical. My grandmother liked jazz. But as far as like the bands that really I got into early on was Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, I guess Deep Purple a little bit. My friends like Deep Purple. I never liked Kiss. And I still to this day, I'm like, I think they're dumb. A couple songs, I suppose. I got some couple hooks. But Van Halen was I loved those early Van Halen records. Yeah. The drumming wasn't spectacular. It was solid. But the guitar playing, oh my God. And then David's voice. I didn't really get into guitar playing and want to learn how to play the guitar until I heard Johnny Marr. When I heard the Smiths, that's when I was like, who is this guy? Like I heard Eddie doing all the tapping and I was like, yeah, that's cool. But then when I heard Johnny's tone, his Rickenbacker tone, and it probably went through a Vox amp, and it's just the beautiful chords he created. That's when I was like, I need to learn how to play guitar. So that helped with coping. Like even when I was still living at home and still in high school, I the second instrument was the bass, and then guitar followed right after that. Now, by no means am I Johnny Marr or anything like that, but it allowed me to play something that wasn't as annoying to my family as drums can be.
Right.
Because there was one point I got 5 siblings, so they would come into Darrin, like grab me by the shoulder and like throw me off the kit. Like, shut the up. And I'm like, what time is it? They're like, it's 8:30. And I'm like, God, I lost track of time. They're like, but I was like, I sit there and look at the drums like, and I tap, but that, or I'd have a pad, but that that's not, so that's when bass, I picked up a bass and started to learn songs.
Yeah. Bass was my second instrument too, because I think we drummers, we gravitate to the drums as much in a physical way as in a sort of musical cerebral way, because it's like, it's a cathartic thing just to bash on something, you know?
It does feel good.
And there's so much energy coming off of the instrument. It's the loudest instrument. And so when you're playing, you're not only getting something out, but it's giving something back to you. And it's just your whole body's kind of vibrating. And I feel like when I wasn't playing the drums, the bass was the next best thing, because when you get that low frequency moving, and it's also depending on what kind of bass you play, because I like to do the slapping and popping and that kind of thing. It was like the early 90s, and that was really in style.
The Chili Pepper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Infectious Grooves.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I think for me, I was around a lot of guitarists. So that was kind of like, that was already occupied. My older brother was a guitarist, and so I picked up some chords and stuff like that. But the bass and the drums the rhythm section became.
Yeah. And it makes sense for drummers to want to learn as much as they can about the bass and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know a lot of bass players that are relatively decent drummers. It's funny though. I think I'm a better bass player than most bass players are drummers. I don't know about Maroon 5, but no one in Goldfinger could play drum. Well, Feldman could.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
John was actually a pretty okay drummer.
Yeah.
On the first demos, there was like punk drumming, not so much fills, but he got the feel. And I remember listening to it and going and learning the 5 songs, and I remember asking John, who played drums on this? And he goes, is that a drum machine? He goes, that's me. I'm like, oh my God. He was like, you can play, John. He's like, not like you.
Huh.
I can't go across that. I can't do all that snare stuff. I'm just like kick snare, crash, stuff like that. But I find that most drummers are better at guitar and bass than anybody in a band is at the drums. Because I know, besides Feldman, if you take Feldman out of the equation, all the guys in Goldfinger couldn't play a lick. I don't know about Maroon 5. I don't know if any of those guys could play.
Well, I have a theory that every singer like secretly wants to be a drummer. Like the frontman is always yearning to get behind the drums. I don't know if that's every band, but that certainly was Adam as well. And every drummer secretly wants to get out and get in front of the microphone and get the crowd attention and all that.
Dave Grohl.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think for me, I was kind of a shy kid, but when I was playing the drums, I felt like confident and strong, but I just couldn't wait. Like when we just play house parties and stuff when we were teenagers, any opportunity to get up to that microphone. And Adam wouldn't complain because he loved to get behind the drums. And
did he play?
He was not like trained, neither was I, but he's just like kind of a savant. Like any instrument he can sit down at and within a short period of time could figure out how to play something.
That's John Feldman.
Yeah.
Like, clarinet?
Yeah, there was one time on tour, Adam took a little bit of guitar lesson, and that was it. And there was one time on tour in the middle of with like Maroon 5 just starting to have a hit, and we were at we were finally starting to have like actual hotels, like not motels and sleeping in the van. We were in like the lobby of some Sheraton or Hilton or something, maybe like in Atlanta or somewhere on the East Coast. And we're waiting in the lobby for our tour manager to like check us out, get us going to the radio station, whatever it was doing. And there was a piano sitting in the lobby. And Adam, of course, ADD kid, wanders over to the piano. Nobody's playing it. Maybe I'll just click around. I'm like, oh, this should be fun. Because he's never played the piano before. I mean, literally, maybe had tinkered a little bit, just fooling around, but never took a lesson, never actually played. Even all the time we'd been in the studio at that point, he'd never like done anything. And he just decides he's going to do his impression of like a free-form jazz, like cocktail pianist. It's like, and he's like faking it. And it's weird, like chord structures and stuff, but it sounds like real jazz. Like it just hearing it in his head and picking out what keys to do. Like even if he hit like kind of a honker every now and then, he would like turn it like Miles Davis into like part of the next phrase. And I was like, there's a very small group of people in this world that have that skill set to just sit down at an instrument and hear something and be able to figure out how to make that sound. Like people study for years, and even if they've learned all of the ways in which you're supposed to do something, can't improvise in that way. And so that was a moment where I was kind of like, yeah, I'm in a different league as a musician. Like I have my fun and I have my skill set and I can refine that, but I don't think I'll ever be in that.
Did you know that about Adam the whole time? Because I knew that about John Feldman and Goldfinger. When I met him, I'll tell you the story about when I met him in a minute, and because I didn't like him. and he didn't like me.
Mm.
It's a good story. But when I finally got in as John's friend and went to his house and saw his studio, which was very, very modest, but he could play anything. He could play bass really well. He's a fantastic bass player, relatively decent drummer, really good guitar player, great singer, incredible songwriter, really good at piano, could play like Let It Be, note for note. But then he started to play. He could play trumpet. He picked up a trumpet one day and he's like, oh. I'm like, oh my God, dude. so I knew that about this guy early on, that he had this incredible skill set with music. Did you know that about Adam? Or was that the moment you're like, wow, this guy can do anything?
I had a hunch. I sometimes take credit for discovering Adam Levine, depending on who we're talking to, but we're here on my show, so I can take credit.
Might as well.
Because I don't know. I mean, I think people saw him as charming and somewhat talented as a kid, but he was kind of rambunctious in some settings and kind of shy in other settings. And I don't think anyone was like pointing at him saying that kid's a star or anything like that. But there was a moment when he was about 14 years old that I went to go see. He was in a band, it was like a rival band of I was in my brother's band at the time. And we were playing around town. My older brother and his friends were going off to college. And so it was like they'd been playing around town.
This is Los Angeles, right?
Yeah. Okay. Sunset Strip. And so we played the Troubadour, the Whiskey, the Roxy, all those places. And then a mutual friend of Adam Levine's and mine, Adam Salzman, had this band. He was a kid who was a year younger than me. And Adam Levine was just like a afterthought in that band. He was just a kid strumming rhythm guitar side stage. And I go to the show at the Troubadour, and I was really just going there to support my friends, but also just to kind of like, this rival band, like we're better
Who
than
do they
them.
think they are?
Yeah. And they were pretty tight actually. And I was kind of in the grunge ilk at that point, because this is the early 90s, and they were kind of still stuck in the Van Halen kind of hair band era. So there was a lot of bandanas and like a lot of like tapping and stuff like that. And I was like impressed, but also like, oh my God, that's lame.
When is this going to go away?
Yeah, exactly. But Adam's just kind of like earnestly, like with his head down, strumming rhythm guitar at the side of the stage until the last song of the set. And Adam Salzman invites him up to center stage to sing lead vocal. And he steps up at like 14 years old and very timidly starts to sing the song Rockin' Robin. They do a cover of Rockin' Robin. And I just like stopped in my tracks and I was like, okay, first of all, this is not what I've been seeing for the rest of the set. And second of all, that voice is cutting through this room like a knife. It was just, the tone was so pure and so pristine, and he was not, well trained or anything like that, but it's just a natural knack for knowing where the melody is and to tonally kind of just cut through the mix. And by manner, he was still shy, but I was like, that kid at that age to be commanding everyone's attention that way, he's got something.
And how old were you at this point?
I was 16.
Oh, a couple years older.
Yeah. And so I had a hunch. And then when we started playing together early on, I think I realized like he would sit behind the drums and be like, have you played? And he's like, no, just, he was really into Motley Crue, and he like could play Wild Side and like, Shout at the Devil and stuff like that, which I remember you guys used to cover, right?
Yeah, just for fun. Yeah, we did it. Yep.
So I think I had a hunch. I was like, most kids this age, 14 years old, aren't just sitting down and figuring out Tommy Lee drum parts without some lessons and stuff. And I was like, I've been playing for a few years now, and I like have to practice to get this stuff down. And he's never played, and he's just figuring. So I had just kind of a hunch there was something there, but it was so undeveloped. And I think it was like a diamond in the rough that took time to get to that point, because he had no work ethic, and he had no, as a really, pretty severe ADHD, kind of like just discipline and really practicing and stuff like that was not really the thing, but it was just having fun and going where the adventure takes you for enough amount of time that the skill set started to develop. And then it really was like a decade in when all of a sudden he realized, okay, well, I have to be a frontman. I have to be somebody who not just tinkers with this and tinkers with that, but I have to actually own this role and take it seriously. And then I was impressed because then he did develop the work ethic and how to, but it sounds like John had kind of had the work ethic early on as well. He was kind of he seemed very driven to me. I remember he was always
incredibly driven and very proficient. When we finally got together and we became friends and he heard me drum because he didn't think I was a good drummer. Like I worked at really quick. The story's really quick.
Yeah.
I worked at Starbucks with his friend Damien. He was in a band called Electric Love Hogs that were like slappy, bassy, chili peppersy kind of. They really wanted to be Infectious Grooves, but
oh yeah,
and a little touch of glam because it was like 1990, 89. And they broke up, and John was trying to get his second career going, and he would come in to see his friend Damien, and me and Damien were close. And Damien told John I was a drummer, and John one day goes, "Hey, Darrin, I hear you play drums." And I go, "Yeah, I do," and had no idea about my background, which was metal, punk, and and rock. I loved metal, still do. And he's like, "What do you think of Dave Grohl?" It's 92. He goes, "What do you think of Dave Grohl?" And I go, "I think Dave Grohl's great. Dave Grohl's a great drummer." He's like, he looked at me, matter of fact, and pointed and goes, "He's the best rock drummer in the fucking world right now." And I go, "Oh, well, probably not." Like I forgot who I mentioned, but like this guy. He's like, "Oh, do you think you're better than Dave Grohl?" And technically, I probably am better than Dave Grohl, and I'm not tooting my own horn or patting myself on the back. But I go, "Yeah, John, technically, I probably am a little bit better than Dave Grohl." And he got so mad. "Fuck you. Fuck you," right to my face, spitting in my face.
Wow.
I'm like, "Bro, take it easy, relax." And so we didn't like each other. And then he'd come in and see Damien, and we wouldn't say two words to each other. And he'd glare at me, I glare at him. And then he one day came up to me and he goes, "What do you think of, do you like metal?" Again, not knowing my metal background. And he goes, I go, "Yeah, I love metal." And he goes, "Pantera. What do you think of Pantera?" And I go, "I love Pantera." And he goes, "Vinnie Paul. What do you think of Vinnie Paul's drumming?" And I go, "Vinnie Paul's a fantastic metal drummer, world class." And he goes, "Let me guess, you can do all the double bass stuff too, right?" I go, "Actually, I can." And he goes, "Wow, you must be the best fucking drummer in Los Angeles." And I was like, I said, I looked right at him. I go, "You are just such an asshole." And he goes, "Yeah, I know." So then he gave a demo tape, which wasn't called Goldfinger, just 5 songs and John's phone number on it. To this guy, Pete. Pete was this hippy dippy fish, Grateful Dead guy. He was making coffee one day. And he goes, "You know that guy, John, Damien's friend?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "He came in and he gave me this demo tape. And it's really not my thing." And I go, "Oh, okay." He's like, "It's probably more your speed." Took it home, played it, blown away. All John was, had a mixer, a beta mixer, and had some outboard gear, was learning the craft of becoming an engineer and a producer. And the demo sounded fucking great. Really, really polished demos. And the drumming was fantastic and the songwriting was spectacular. And I call him up and I'll never forget this as long as I live. I go, "Hey, John, it's Darrin Pfeiffer." And he goes, "What do you want?" matter of fact. And I ignored it and I go, "Hey, I got your demo tape from Pete at Starbucks." And he goes, Oh, well, what do you think?" And I go, "I am fucking floored. Like, I think that this is exactly what I want to do." He became my best friend right there and then. He's like, "Oh, we got a jam, dude." And then he finally heard me play. And then we became close. But into the whole thing about, with Adam, I quickly learned how good John was when he started writing songs. He had the 5 songs, and then like a week later he had 2, and he demoed them already. And he was like, I got 2 new songs. And one was Anxiety, and one was Mind's Eye, like the songs that came out on our first record. And then 2 more, Anxiety and Pictures, and then 2 more, King for a Day and Stay. And they just kept coming. Week in, week out. "John, hey, I got another song. You want to hear it?" And he'd pop it in the cassette in his car. Remember cassettes? And he popped the cassette, and I was like, I was leaned back in the chair like, "John, this is good." And he wasn't really that secure. He was like, "Do you really like it?" I go, "John, this is absolutely perfect. Drumming's perfect. The melodies are perfect. The solos and the octaves are perfect. The lyrics are really good. Harmony, is that you? That's me doing harmonies." I go, this is ready for release right now."
Wow.
He's like, "You wouldn't change anything?" I go, "Well, I'd add some drum fills." But other than that, even the kick patterns were perfect with the bass.
Yeah.
Do do da do do da do 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 do. Like, just so I realized early on that John was the guy.
Yeah, he had the vision.
Even though we had some rocky times, I just recently mended fences with him.
Really?
We're talking all the time now.
Wow.
But there was a period where it wasn't really copacetic. And I told John when we had our coffee and mended our fences and made amends, I said, "Well, we might have had a few screaming matches and a few blowouts, but at the end of the day, I never once ever talk shit about your ability to write a song or record a song. I would go around town saying, John is this, and John is this, and John is that, and I can't believe he did this or said that. But that's all high school stuff, and I'm sorry, but I never once said that man doesn't know how to write a song, or that man doesn't know how to record a song.
Mm-hmm.
I said, your success as a producer right now is absolutely 100% earned, and you deserve every bit of it. And I hope you become the next world-class producer. And he started to get a little, he didn't cry, but he's like, dude, like, seriously? And I go, yeah, you're really good. So I noticed that in John Feldman early on too, that this guy can do anything. He can sing, he can write, he can play bass, drums, piano, clarinet, just trumpet. Like, the guy just had that Prince vibe, that same gene that Adam had.
So
innate.
This kind of push and pull, this love-hate thing, it's very common in bands. You find personalities that can be both complementary in terms of the art, but really rub up against each other in a way that's why bands can be so volatile, why you never see original lineups for very long, why bands break up. So do you think that was part of the fuel of what made you guys tick, was the way that you guys did rub up against each other? Or do you think it was just part of the nature of the beast? Like, how do you relate to that relationship? Was it something that was necessary? Was it just something you had to deal with?
I think a little from column A, a little from column B, a little from column C, all of it. It definitely came out in our live set. I know for a fact that I played a little harder on those days we got into a fight before the show.
It's like Stuart Copeland used to write, "Fuck you, Sting."
Oh, fuck you, you cunt.
Right.
Fuck you, you cunt. And he swears to this day, interviewed him. I'll get you in touch with him.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's got a beautiful room like you. I asked him about that, and he goes, "No, that wasn't for Sting." And I go, he's like, "I get asked this all the time. No, it wasn't for Sting." And
really?
I go, okay.
Huh.
He's like, "I swear to God, I was just ready on my drums that day."
Did he tell you who? He didn't tell you who it was for?
No, he didn't tell me who it was for.
Wow. As a therapist, there's a lot of follow-up questions there, because where my mind goes first is maybe it was for himself.
Oh, it could have been for himself, but I'm almost positive he didn't want to. He didn't want to come out and say it was for Sting, and then Sting hears it and Sting gets all butthurt. But those two have definitely mended their fences. But the push and pull and dichotomy in the band and the dynamics are it's difficult, because you've been in many bands, successful bands, and it can be a grind. It can be difficult. Tensions boil over, and you say things you don't mean. Luckily, in Goldfinger, it never got physical. We never hit each other. Well, me and Charlie did, but me and John. But Charlie was like the scrapper, and I was a scrapper, and we'd always hug it out. But me and John, and even though we had some brutal screaming matches where he was right here,
wow,
and he was flexing, but I'm 3 times his size, and I always thought to myself, I wanted to bash his face in so many times. I wanted to grab his by his hair and just into a cheese grater. But I always was like, I can't hit the guy, because if I hit him, I'll kill him.
Ooh, yeah.
Because then he'll come at me, and then I'll defend myself, and I'm literally 3 times the man's size. And now he's taking boxing lessons. So when I saw him, I said, "Hey, you're really good at the boxing." He's like, "Yeah, I'm getting really into it." And I go, "Boy, I'm glad we didn't fight." He's like, "Oh, you'd still kick my ass." I go, "Maybe I have the weight on you, but I think you have the technique."
Right.
Like, I just love it. It's a good exercise. And I go, "Yeah." So, but there's always that push and pull. So whenever you see bands that are the original members, original 4 guys, 5 guys, I always think to myself right away, what's your secret?
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with growing up together. And I think Maroon 5 had that.
Yeah.
Goldfinger didn't grow up together. The Deftones are a good example.
Sure.
I saw the Deftones so many, and I'm still the original guys, but the original guys. And then I saw them play over the years, and I'd go backstage and I'd walk into their dressing room, and they literally were off stage for 5 minutes, and they already had a boombox going, and they had a joint was already lit, and beers were in their hands, and they were high-fiving and hugging and laughing. And I remember walking into the dressing room like, "Hey guys," and like, "Hey Darrin, what's up? You want a drink?" I'm like, "Yeah, great set." But on my mind, I'm like, what's the secret?
Yeah.
Why do you guys love each other so much?
Yeah.
So I think it's personalities. Like, some people just love each other, and some people are combative.
Yeah.
And you get the mixture of different people, and And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I think there's definitely truth to that. I think that because we started the band so young and it was before anyone had emerged as like the big fish, we were all just brothers kind of bonded by this thing that we were starting together at age 14 to 16.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back, it's kind of a miracle that those personalities worked as well as they did, that there was a chemistry there, because all four of the original members were all pretty opinionated and stubborn, and we would fight about everything. And it was like everything was a debate. But Adam was so young, and so like the kind of like the confidence hadn't really come yet to be like, well, I'm the man, and so I'm going to tell you what's right, which I think comes when you realize like, oh, I have a gift, and so that you can back it up. Some people have that even without the gifts, of course, that kind of ego.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that all of us had that to a certain extent, that a certain level of internal confidence that we had something to say. But it was kind of a miracle that we could work that out early on. And I also think that because we signed our first record deal like when we were teenagers, and we had to go through the whole process of like working through a band agreement, just the logistics of like, what if we do have success? Like, who's going to make the money? Like, how is this going to be divvied up? Like, we'd had those conversations long before we had success. And so it was kind of already understood pretty well. We were fortunate also that like my dad was an attorney. We grew up in LA. Like we understood the ins and outs of how these record contracts work and stuff. So I was prepared for the fact that like the songwriters are going to make more money, but they're being fair in that we're a band that has an agreement in terms of the arrangements and certain ownership of things. And so there wasn't that point where you go like, oh my God, I thought we were equals. And it's like, it's not equal. And then all those are the kind of things that bands break up over, because it's like, what have I been doing this for the last 5 years of my life for? If it's very different in different bands. I think the bands that have that brotherhood do fare better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that people are necessarily alike. I find that actually opposites, just like romantic relationships, can attract and can be very complementary. Like, Adam being this sort of fly by the seat of his pants, ADHD kind of guy, was very impulsive and able to go in a lot of directions that I wasn't able to go because I was so anal and OCD. But we both benefited from that because we both needed to share in each other's different strengths.
Right.
In your band, if you saw that in terms of just like the difference in personalities, the differences in terms of what you brought to the table, because I think that's true not just for bands. I think that's true in a work environment, in a team, in a business, in an athletic team. You don't have to have 5 Michael Jordans to win a championship. You need a Michael Jordan, and you need 4 other people that complement Michael Jordan in a way that it comes together.
Kerr and a Pippen and a Rodman. You need the pieces around Michael to make it work.
Yeah, you need somebody that can shoot outside, and somebody who can post up down low. Somebody who's a good rebounder. Like a great band has that kind of chemistry where everyone kind of figures out where their space is and they can play off of each other. And no, I don't need to be Sting. I can be Stewart, Did you find that to be true in your band?
Yeah, and I think what I brought to the band, besides the drumming that John craved,
mm-hmm.
and later on he told me, he's like, Darrin, you literally are one step ahead of me. That's why I love your drumming. And so what do you mean? He goes, we were both Clash fans, and he said, you know how Strummer once said about Topperhead, and I can literally write or throw anything at Topper, and he always has a response. He never goes, oh, give me a second. He goes, oh, you mean like this? Or like this? Or like this? Mm-hmm. Charlie Watts was the same way. Like there's literally nothing you can throw at Topperhead and that he can't play, doesn't have a beat for, or a feel for, or a groove for. He goes, you're the same way. Like I didn't know that you liked the Specials and you were a Police fan. So when I started writing ska rhythms, you had the 4 on the floor. You had that side stick Stewart thing going on. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. But then all of a sudden you'd start doing it. I'm like, this guy can play ska. And then you liked Bob Marley and Peter Tosh and reggae. And, right. You got into that. You knew that one drop feel with the hi-hat, all the tricky hi-hat work. Mm-hmm. You knew all the reggae fills that fill around that one drop. And I was just like, Jesus, this guy. And of course you had the punk stuff. And then later on I started to write because I knew you had double bass chops. So there was a few moments, not songs, moments where there was like, right. And then like I had that color I could play with. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I brought to the band. But I also brought the animalness.
Right.
Like literally the animal from the Muppets. Like I just was a spaz. And Trey Cool's the same way. You know, he lights his drums on fire or jump through the kit, and you just never knew what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Well,
I think every great rock band has to have that. I mean, whether it's Keith Moon and the Who.
I played a whole show with a thong on.
Right.
I also set my drums on fire a few times. We would get in fights. John was very vocal about the fans. He loved the fans, and if security guards were being too rough, we'd stop the show and go, "You're fired. We're not going to play until that guy leaves."
Yeah. So
the promoter would come out and go, "You got to go." And or fans would have a heart. They'd be getting roughed up, and John would just drop his guitar and jump into the audience to fight the guy.
Jeez, like Axl Rose.
Because he knew Charlie would drop his guitar and jump into to fight. Never a fan. It was always a security guard.
Right.
The big 300-pound security guard that was taking a kid that weighed 100 pounds and like ragdolling him.
Okay.
And we're like, what are you doing? Like,
right.
And so he'd jump in, John would jump in, and I'd jump in. There was one time where a fan in Pittsburgh, we're on tour with Bad Religion, and John was getting, John jumped into the audience and was guitar, and apparently the 300-pound security guy was like grabbing his junk and squeezing it.
Eesh.
John gets on stage, and we were playing Here in Your Bedroom. And I was hungover. I was so hungover that day. The night before was my hometown, Buffalo, and I got wrecked with my friends. I slept literally in my bunk until showtime. The tour manager, "Darrin, you're on stage in 5 minutes. I'm going to physically pull you out of this bunk." And I'm going, "Okay, I'm coming." You know, I'm drumming like this. God, kill me. If I got through the set. So John gets on stage in the middle of the song, not singing, and he grabbed the mic and he goes, "I will take this guitar, you fucker, and I will shove it up your ass. You want to fuck me? I'll fuck you backstage after the show." And I'm like, "What happened?" So the guy was mad dogging John the whole set, just looking at him like, So I'm like, okay, that guy might be a problem. So thank you very much, Whirlwind of Goldfinger. Bad Religion's next, and the guy followed John backstage. So as I put my sticks down, I'm gonna have to get into a fight, I think. And I'm not in the mood for a fight. So and I got backstage, and we get to the buses, and the guy is my size, a little bit bigger, maybe. And he's in John's face. And he's like, "Where's your fans now?" It's a tough guy, and he's pressing up on him. He's flexing, and John is petrified. He's like, "Dude, I was, you grabbed my stuff, and like you're like," he's like, "Yeah, well, you're not. No one's here to get your back." I heard the whole thing, and as I'm getting closer, I push John aside, and I go, "Pick on someone your own size." I grab him by his shirt, and I just unload, and he grabs me. I'm wearing a hockey jersey. That was my thing back then. And he starts unloading on me. And it's a full hockey fight. We're exchanging rights.
Jeez.
And he gets on the ground, and we're just beating the hell out of each other. Turns out he was an off-duty Pittsburgh police officer.
Oh my God.
So I got charged with aggravated assault on a peace officer.
Oh God.
$10,000 later, I got out of jail. The judge didn't want to let me go. He let me go, and it made MTV News.
Okay.
John Goldfinger gets in fight with a security guard. I don't know. They said a cop, security cop at a Pittsburgh venue opening for Bad Religion. So wherever we went for the next month or two, people would walk up to me and go, "Did you beat up a cop?" And I tried to explain to them, like, "No, I didn't beat up a cop." But then I got so sick of explaining it, I just said, "Yeah, I beat up a cop." So it's like, "You're a legend." So I think every band needs stories like that.
Yeah.
And needs a guy that can do something like that and beat up a guy. I was a wild man, and I did this a few times. We got into fights with security guards because they were being rough, and the cops would come, and sometimes I got arrested, sometimes I didn't. But that one went the distance. I went in front of a judge, and I had to give the guy the money. He wanted $50,000. He's like, "You broke my jaw," and I go, "You broke mine." He goes, "I have a black eye." I go, "So do I." And he goes, "You broke my nose." I go, "So my nose is busted too." And, "What do you want from me?" And he's like, "You're in a big rock band. I want $50,000." I go, my lawyer's like, "Keep going. You're doing great." And I go, the bail was 10. I'll give you that. And he goes, "I'll take it."
That was it. That was the whole negotiation.
The judge was hilarious. So get there, and the guy goes, "I want to drop the charges." And the judge goes, "You two got something going on?" And we look at each other. We're like, "No, we just want this behind us." And he goes, "Yeah, right." dismissed. And when I heard that gavel come down, you know those moments in your life when you feel like the weight is just, it was that moment.
Wow.
Like it was a felony. Like it would have been a big deal to if it went through. And every band, especially punk bands or rock bands, maybe not so much pop bands or jazz bands, but I think if you're in a punk band, there needs to be that element of danger.
Yeah.
And the fans need to know about it.
Yeah. Like there's a cred in that. You got to live up to this image to a certain extent. The danger
but it wasn't scripted. It just happened. These fights and these moments internally or externally with the cop, they just happened. Mm-hmm. Trouble just found us.
What happened with your relationship with John after that? Was he grateful?
He was my best friend at that point. But as time went on, just little stupid arguments. And this is one of the things that got me and John back together and back to talking. I told him, I said,
well, before we get to that, what went wrong? Because you left the band in 2016, was it? Yeah. And that was, I presume, at a certain point, your relationship with John just reached a breaking point.
Well, Kelly Lemieux, the bass player. Well, Simon left after the second record. Simon left after that, right? And he'd already had enough. Yeah. Of the bullshit. He saw that John was becoming something he didn't recognize then, and he left. And then eventually we got Kelly Lemieux, the bass player, who's an amazing bass player. Now he's in Buck Cherry. This guy is world class, phenomenal. I'd put him up against Matt Freeman any day of the week. So then he left, and then Charlie left for like the 10th time. He left the band at least 5 times. Yeah. He's like, I can't deal with it. It was just me and John. And around 2016 or so, it was just unbearable. I thought it was unbearable to be in the band. I didn't enjoy it at all. Mm-hmm. So when I got kicked out, I didn't put up a fight. I'm like, pay me the money that's owed me and let me get out of the contract, the band agreement. We had one of those. Yeah. I wanted out of that because I wanted to keep my publishing. I wanted to keep, my mechanicals. I wanted to keep all the things that were mine. And I did. In perpetuity, which makes sense. But I wanted out of the contract because we got sued constantly. We got sued all the time. And it was because of John. John would throw his guitar in the audience, smash a kid in the face. We got sued. John would throw his mic didn't work, and he pulled an Axl Rose and threw it into the audience, smash some kid in the eye. We got sued.
Wow.
All the time. John would jump in the audience, break some kid's neck. We get sued.
Yikes.
So it happened all the time. And one time it was really bad. We had to fly to Dallas and give all these depositions, and the guy sued us for all this money. And my lawyer's like, you need to get out of that contract because you're not in the band, but you can still be sued.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, let me onto the contract. So it was a relief to leave at that point.
It was.
But as time went on and I got older, I called him up and said, everything between me and you, John, is high school. We never hit each other. We never slept with each other's wives or girlfriends, as far as I know. We never stole untold amounts of money from each other, and we never, ever got physical. I said, everything else is high school, behind the back garbage. And I'm in my 50s. I am so over that. And I would love nothing more than us to just forget about everything and be friends. Mm-hmm. I go, this isn't a Goldfinger thing. It kind of was a little bit. Like, I would like to play with Goldfinger, but with Simon and Charlie, the original. But I said, I just love to have a cup of coffee with you. And if you had an extra ticket to Sting at the Bowl and you called me, I'd be like over the moon. Like, yeah, let's go see Sting. Or if I had a ticket, hey, John, you want to go see Steel Pulse? I got a ticket. I know you like Steel Pulse. Like, let's yeah, dude, I'll be there. Like, that's what I want more than anything. And he's like, absolutely. So we met, we had coffee, we made our amends, we hugged. And then for 3 hours, we just told stories and laughed and laughed and laughed. I'm really grateful that it came around full circle.
That's lovely. You don't hear that happening very often because usually band breakups are nasty. And once you've gotten to that point, and if there is.
But there was nothing for either one of us to hang on to. Like Darrin stole $25,000, or John hit me in the face and broke my teeth, or John slept with my wife.
Right.
You're
not coming back from that. No.
Or it'd be really hard.
Yeah.
Bands have done it. I don't know how.
Yeah.
But there was nothing egregious. There was nothing that made me said, I will never, ever, ever, ever talk to that man ever again. Mm-hmm. And he said the same thing. It's like, Darrin, you didn't do anything. You just were hard to deal with. And he goes, I was hard to deal with. And like I said, we hugged it out and it was all good. But there are moments in bands where it's physical, and there's theft and there's infidelity with wives and girlfriends, which is so stupid. I don't understand that at all. Are there a shortage of girls around? You're in a big rock band. There's girls everywhere.
Yeah, there's more.
Why do you have to
going
sleep
on
with
there.
the singer's girlfriend?
It's when the relationship has degraded to the point where you're actively trying to wound the person. You know, the egos have gotten so big, and there's just so much strife and resentment that's been pushed down for over a decade that you're going out of your way to actually just it's self-sabotage at that point too. You know what I mean? It's just totally destructive behavior, and you do see that because the lifestyle of being in a band, and it's like the normal rules kind of go out the window at a certain point. You're so enabled by that lifestyle. You really do have to be extraordinarily down to earth to be able to maintain sanity at a certain point when your lifestyle is that kind of abnormal. What was leaving though like for you? Because I know for me, you know, regardless of how painful it had gotten performing and everything, physically, but also just emotionally and psychologically, and your situation was different than mine, but it sounds like there was a lot that went on over the course of band members leaving and the personalities and all that stuff. In some ways, I relate to you saying it was a relief, you know, to walk away and to feel like, okay, I can take a sigh of relief and take a deep breath. But there was also just so much identity wrapped up in being a member of the band that just moving forward was like, I don't even know who I am at this point if I'm not the drummer in Maroon 5. So what was that transition like for you? Was it something where you were able to turn the page quickly, or was it something you had to do some soul searching to figure out where you were post Goldfinger?
Again, column A, column B.
Okay.
It wasn't fun for me because I knew every time there was a Goldfinger show, there was going to be a fight with John about a number of things. The set list, rehearsals were brutal. They were just brutal if he showed up. The flights, the money, everything was a fight. So when I left, and I also left Goldfinger at a time when Goldfinger wasn't really that busy, quite frankly. John was well on his way, on his ascension to becoming this producer he is today, this successful producer he is today. So there were a lot of gaps, large gaps. And I think that's part of the reason why Kelly went on and found Buck Cherry and Charlie eventually left. There was no shows. They were sprinkled in, and that's how we made money. But not so much me. I got into radio. I was living in Toronto for 10 years. Did radio there for 10 years, and then started my own podcast 7-8 years ago. And then I was also playing drums with Sum 41, filling in for them.
Yeah, I saw that.
I was playing, and then I just joined Punk Rock Karaoke at that time with Steve Soto, who passed away, and Greg Hetson, Eric from NoFX, and then we got Randy from Pennywise and Stanley from the Dickies. So that is a fun band because we don't have a singer. It's karaoke.
Right.
And we just sit around.
A band without a singer. Wow, that's amazing.
Well, the fans sing. They come up and do Clash songs, Ramones songs, and Dead Boys and stuff like that. Dead Kennedys. It's just a blast. So when I left Goldfinger, I sold my radio career. I had my podcast was just starting up and doing well, and started to get some momentum on Adobe. I was in Punk Rock Karaoke. I was doing sessions. People were calling me like, "Hey, do you want to play on this track? Like, you have a studio?" I'm like, "I do." Pro Tools was a thing. It was really easy just to send stems to people. So then I thought to myself, I'm taking this drama out of my life. Yeah, and yes, I'm also taking the money out of it and the prestige out of it of being the drummer of Goldfinger. But I went through some counseling. I had some therapy, and my therapist said, "Darrin, you were in Goldfinger when Goldfinger was Goldfinger, the glory years, those first 3-4 records. Like that's what most fans look at and go, that was bulletproof Goldfinger era. Especially the first 2 records. So that's what. Not that Goldfinger sucks now. Not that the songs that John writes now are bad. They're not. And not that the shows that they play now are bad. They're not. But it's not that. He goes, that is you. That is your identity in perpetuity. You're going to have that for the rest of your life.
Sure.
You're going to be the drummer from Goldfinger forever.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I was like, yeah, you're right. Because you don't really, and like, what do you play? Like 4 shows a year when you left the band?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. I play 4 shows a month with Punk Rock Karaoke. And again, I wasn't getting paid as much doing Punk Rock Karaoke, but the fun level, the fun payment.
Yeah.
Like I drove home on a cloud 9. There was never any arguments, and there still isn't.
Mm-hmm.
We all get along like a house on fire, and it's and it's just so much fun. Whereas in Goldfinger at that time it wasn't. And I think a reunion is coming, but a few more fences need to be mended.
Yeah.
And again, nothing egregious. I don't think anything that me and Charlie have between each other is unfixable. We just need to be on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the day will come when all four of us are in a room together playing some show somewhere and playing that first record. That would be the ideal thing, is to play those first two records back to back, play all the songs.
Yeah.
And if it happens, great. But I'm also a mature enough man where if it doesn't, c'est la vie.
Mm-hmm.
Such is life. Like who cares?
Yeah.
I'll always have these memories.
Yeah.
And like I said, I got all these other things going on in my life: the podcasts, the punk rock karaoke, the sessions, my wife, my stepdaughter, all my friends. So my life's better now than it was then, and that's the way it should be. You should be growing and getting better and having a better, more fulfilled life than 10 years ago.
Absolutely. I think that's the place that I've had to come to, because I think for probably about a decade after I left the band, I was just always comparing everything to that life and whether or not it matched up to what I imagined my life was going to be if I was in the band for the rest of my life. And everything was falling short when I would compare in that way. It's like, well, I'm not going to make as much money. I'm not going to do something that's as meaningful in the way that, the creative process was when I was in that band meaningful to me. And I'm not going to be doing something that, is going to have the kind of clout and recognition that we got, in Maroon 5. And it was just like, it's like comparison is the thief of joy, It wasn't until I just kind of accepted the reality, was like, I'm so grateful that I got to do that for a certain period of time. And then also the recognition, like, you're right, even with Maroon 5, who is, still on top of the world and playing arenas and stuff, it's like, it's still not the same as it was when I was in the band. Like they don't play that many shows. When they do, they play huge shows. But it's a different animal, it's a very different landscape than being, this burgeoning success, that whole roller coaster ride of coming from the garage and going all the way up to the arena. Like, you can't do that again. That's like one moment, even for a band like U2, like you can't go backwards to that moment to when they were burgeoning and becoming U2, so it's like, it's the gratitude that made the difference for me. It was recognizing I'm grateful for having lived that and had that experience. And even if I were in the band now, it wouldn't be that experience. It would be a different experience, and it might be a good one, but I'm capable of having great experiences that are meaningful in different ways. And trying to relive something in the past usually doesn't work out the way that you intend it to. It's much better to be open to the possibilities of what today and tomorrow could bring if you're open to them, than to be trying to shoehorn in something from the past.
Right. And you lived a dream. We both did, from the garage, hoping we could get a record label, hoping we could make a video. Maybe one day we'll be on one of those fancy tour buses, or we'll play these great big venues. You went from that garage to the stadium.
Yeah.
So that's a gold medal.
Yeah. Like
in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Like you'll have that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I'll have what I did for the rest of my life. And that's what my therapist said when she framed it that way. I was like, this makes all the sense. I never even thought of it that way.
Yeah.
I was just like focusing on the bitterness. Like, I hate that guy.
Yeah.
If that guy wasn't that guy, I'd be in the band still, and I'd be playing shows,
but then it wouldn't be the band.
It wouldn't be the band, and it wouldn't be the same. Yeah. Or it wouldn't fit. I wouldn't have realized that I was part of the problem. Like, I'm not guilt-free.
Yeah.
And in the same when I fight with my wife, I always tell her, I'm like, I'm not perfect. I fuck up all the time. Like, I make mistakes constantly, but I recognize that I have this fault, and more importantly, be able to make the amends when appropriate.
Yeah.
And if I can do that, and then try to remember not to screw up, like try to recognize an error before you make it.
Yeah.
Normally I would say something dumb here. I'm just going to walk away.
Yeah.
And upon reflection later, you're like, boy, am I glad I walked away.
Mm-hmm.
I've had those moments in my life lately where I've been like, I could easily say something to my wife and send her in just the stratosphere.
Mm-hmm.
But I go, I'm going to walk away. because the Dodger game's on any minute, and I really want to watch the Dodger. And I'll just go into another room and turn on the TV and watch a couple innings. And then she'll either walk in and come in and go, I'm really sorry for what I said. Or after a few innings, I'll walk in and say, hey, are we cool? I'm really sorry. And she's like, yeah, why wouldn't we be? And I'm like, is it a trap? Like, it's a trap. Okay, Akbar. I'd be like, no, that thing we had earlier. She's like, oh, that was stupid. But, in the past, one of us or both of us would have said and done something to send it into the nuclear level.
Yeah.
It's just growing. And I think has spilled now into my relationship with John and my relationship with Goldfinger.
Well, it sounds like the very thing you're describing in a small way, having a little bit of distance to cool off and have a cooler head, have some perspective before you come back together, is what happened in your relationship with John and Goldfinger as well. Is that if you hadn't had that separation, maybe you would have never gotten to that place where you could reconcile, because you're just in it with each other and fighting all the time. Being able to step away for a bit, grow up a little bit. It's hard when you're like, a band is like a family, and our families trigger us more than anybody, right? It's like, even if you've had distance, it's like you go home for the holidays and it's like you're right back in it, and like your teenage self comes out and all of your buttons and get pushed, and so I think that much like a family, if you can have a little bit of distance and work on yourself and recognize that you have growing to do as well, and then you go back into that environment, then perhaps you're able to bring a little bit more of that perspective and maturity to how you approach it.
Exactly. 100% agree with what you said. And that bands are like families.
Yeah.
Oh boy, you push each other's buttons and then it's guns a-blazing. There have been many times where I didn't hold back, and neither did he. And it wasn't just me and John. It was Charlie and John, Simon and John. Me and Charlie had our moments. But you know what? I look back at it and I think to myself, I wouldn't change it, because it made me the person I am today.
Yeah.
I'm who I am now, and I'm really happy with who I am now.
Yeah.
Because of these life experiences.
Sure.
And if we could ever get in the same room together, it would just be wonderful. But again, if it doesn't happen, I'm not gonna kill myself. We'll see what the future brings.
That's the other perspective that's great from what you've been working on, because if it doesn't happen, you'll be in a place where you can integrate that into yourself in terms of like, it didn't work out, I'm grateful for the past. If it does work out, if something does happen, you're going to be able to appreciate it for whatever it is. You're going to be able to just be present
more,
and
a lot more than haphazardly making amends. Like the amends I made with John and the amends he made with me were real.
Mm-hmm.
They were legitimate. They were ironclad. They felt really good. It felt good for him to say, I'm sorry for everything I did. But it felt better for me to say it.
Yeah.
Everyone loves hearing I'm sorry when someone wrongs you.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that John said, hey, for everything I said and I did, all that side of it. But I really was looking forward to saying, I'm sorry for all the shit I said behind your back and all the trouble I caused you and all the moments you're like, this guy, holy shit. Like all that. I'm just so so sorry. That felt really good.
Wow.
I felt like earlier in the conversation when it's gone finally. Like the room felt like there's more air in it, and it's a really good feeling.
Yeah, it's cleansing.
It is.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, tell me about the things that you're working on now. I know you have this radio show podcast. You're doing some managing. You've got a record label. Tell me about the things you're working on.
Punk rock karaoke, been doing that for almost 10 years now, 9 years, and it's just a blast. Punk rock karaoke, just go online and search punk rock karaoke. We're the original. We did it first. And it's guys from famous bands, myself on drums and Stan Lee from Dickies on guitar, Greg Hudson from Circle Jerks and Bad Religion on guitar, and Randy Bradbury from Pennywise on bass.
Awesome.
And we go all over the world and play, and it's a blast. I'm in another punk band called The Indignants that's starting to pick up some speed and do some momentum. Dirty, rancid style punk rock.
Awesome.
Which is meat and potatoes drumming, but really good punk rock melodies, punk rock hooks, great big chanting choruses. They're called The Indignants. Some session work here and there that I do. And then the podcast, the Dangerous Darrin Show, which has been running now for 7.5 years on Adobe Radio.
Wow.
And I did that just to keep my radio chop sharp because I wanted to get back into radio.
Mm-hmm.
But getting a job at radio in Los Angeles is impossible because those people are lifers.
Mm-hmm.
And every program director said, Darrin, you know how many people I have ahead of you? Get in line, buddy. Your credentials are amazing. Like the stuff you did in Toronto, really good. You're at the edge. Oh my God, what a great station. But I just got no space for you.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, I'll just do a podcast. And then
Sure.
it kind of grew. And then all of a sudden sponsors started calling and then more sponsors started calling and I got bigger and better guests. You know, like Tony Hawk came on and Neil deGrasse Tyson came on, Stuart Copeland. I've had Andy Summers. So 2/3 of the Police.
Wow.
So, so I'm just going to get more creative with the podcast. And that's what's great about podcasting versus terrestrial radio. There's a program director, there's a music director, there's a promotions director. You can't just be yourself like the DJs when I grew up. Those DJs had personality and those breaks were a minute and a half long.
Yeah.
Now it's like 20 seconds, 30 seconds at the most.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and talk about that concert we're promoting or talk about that brand we're promoting. It's like, well, I want people to know me.
Yeah.
That's why the podcasting space is so unique and amazing.
Yeah.
Because people get to know you. Yeah. They get to know what you like and what you don't like and your humor and your wit and so I absolutely love it. The Dangerous Darrin Show. It's on Adobe Radio. At DangerousD_show on Twitter and Instagram. I still call it Twitter.
Yeah.
I still call it the Staples Center too.
Thank you. I'm not going to call it crypto.
Nope. Never.
No.
I can't wait for that to end.
Yeah. It's a weird thing right now. You mentioned that about the podcast, the advent of the era of the podcast, because like everything else has sped up. Everything else has gotten really short. And it's like people can't even watch movies anymore. They watch 90-second clips on TikTok. And yet so many people are into podcasts that are 60, 90 minutes long, sometimes 2 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a yearning to, as you say, to get to know people more. As much as people want that immediacy of something that's funny or entertaining or just delivers something instantaneously, I think we're missing something because of that being the norm at this point. And we're yearning for a form in which we can sort of dive into a longer experience with a human being and get to know them a little bit and have some humanity to it. I don't know. I just had a thought.
No,
about
I
it.
agree with you 100%. And that's the same reason why I think people like bands. Obviously, the music, the songs are strong and hooky. But because Van Halen, Eddie was cool looking and played guitar like an animal, and Dave and Alex's drums were massive. But David Lee Roth was a madman. Had crazy hair, jumped around like a lunatic, and then you heard him do interviews, and he's just like this crazy man behind the mic, and so that personality drew me to Van Halen just as much as the songs.
Yeah.
So we don't have that in the radio anymore. Yeah. Now it's these 30-second, 15-minute breaks, and the DJ just is some guy named John Doe, Jane Doe, and you don't really know who they are. Whereas podcasting, you really get to know that person.
Yeah.
You get to, I like that person's personality. They're funny, or they're pretty serious, or their views align with mine. So yeah. I like that about them.
Well, it feels like when you fall in love with a podcast, it feels like spending time with a friend. And we all need that right now. So I'm sure we could talk about this for another hour. This has been a wonderful conversation, Darrin. It's been great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for coming down, doing this in person, and for sharing with me everything, all this, the history and what you're doing today. It's interesting for me. There's a lot of crossover between our stories, and then there's differences enough that I think it's going to be fascinating to kind of see how we've related to the world just as different people going through similar things. So anyway, I'm looking forward to more of your show, The Dangerous Darrin Show, and everything else that you're doing. This has been another wonderful conversation on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Tune in and join us every Tuesday for new episodes, and we'll just keep making them, and hopefully you'll get to know us a little bit better. Next time, Duck will be a part of the conversation again, but this time it was nice to
he's
catch
there in spirit. I can feel him.
Yes. Well, he's going to be envious, I think, when he watches this, because this was a lot of fun, and not all of them are fun. Some of them are heavy. Some of them are, interesting and engaging, but it's always good to catch up with an old friend. So thank you for joining us for this one. We'll see you next time on the Harder to Breathe podcast.